Hello and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be getting started with the webinar in just a moment. So while folks are getting kind of logged in, starting to connect for the session today, I do have some general housekeeping announcements. You are going to be muted during this presentation. If you'd like to ask a question, please enter it into the online Q&A box. The Q&A box is different than the chat box, so we recommend the questions go in the Q&A. Makes it a lot easier for our moderator at the end to make sure that we're answering all of the questions and they don't get lost in the chat. We will also be saving time at the end of the presentation to address as many questions as possible. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available on the Center for Occupational and Environmental Health YouTube page. It'll also be updated on the website. All participants who logged in with their registration email today for the full live presentation will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the evaluation form that will qualify you for a certificate of completion with 1 continuing education contact hour. Once you've submitted your evaluation, you'll be able to access and print your certificate. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Yassine, who's going to be introducing herself and the topic for today. Thank you, Yassine.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yassine Khan, and I work with the UC Berkeley Labor Occupational Health Program. And we are here today for the SASH program, which is the School Action for Safety and Health program, which is a statewide initiative to help school districts reduce the high rate of work-related injuries and illnesses among school employees. This program is funded by the Commission on Health and Safety and Workers' Compensation and implemented by us at the Labor Occupational Health Program. So we offer free trainings to help build the capacity of district level health and safety coordinators, to be resources to other employees and develop their injury and illness program. We also host webinars like this one. We recently had a webinar on indoor air quality in schools. We did another one on stress as a workplace hazard and other topics that relate to school employees. So we have a collection of all of our previous webinars on our website, which I'll put in the chat. And today we are so excited to have 2 speakers joining us to discuss summer hazards in schools. Justine Weinberg is a certified industrial hygienist with over 35 years of experience in exposure assessment and industrial hygiene. Ms. Weinberg received her BS in environmental toxicology from UC Davis and her MS in environmental health sciences, industrial hygiene from the UCLA School of Public Health. She has been with the Occupational Health Branch at the California Department of Public Health since 2007, where she helped establish the Cleaning for Asthma-Free Schools project in the Work-Related Asthma Prevention Program. Our next speaker is Ilan Ullman. Ilan Ullman is an industrial hygienist within the Occupational Health Branch at the California Department of Public Health. He received his MS in industrial hygiene from the University of Michigan. His prior work was in exposure assessments in above ground strip mines. His current focus is in mitigating exposure to indoor airborne hazards. Thank you both so much for joining us. And now I'll hand it over to Justine.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just find my slides. And there we go. Thank you, Yassine, for that introduction, and Michelle for yours as well. We're really excited to be here to talk to you about something other than COVID. So it's kind of a nice break to focus on something else for a while. We're not, we only have a brief amount of time to touch on each of these topics, so we're just going to give a brief overview of the hazards of, and mitigation of heat illness, wildfire smoke, and chemical hazards. But we will be providing resources where you can find more information. It's getting hotter, and it's going to keep getting hotter with, it seems. It's fitting that we're talking about this on the first day of summer. So happy summer to everyone. We're going to talk about heat illness here. And what is heat illness? It's basically a medical condition that results from your body getting too hot and unable to cope with the heat load. And there are many different names for the kind of universe of heat illness, like heat cramps, heat exhaustion, heat stroke. It also includes the definition that Cal OSHA provides in their heat illness standard, which is 3395, includes fainting. So there, it's kind of a spectrum of things that can happen to you if you are overexposed to heat. It's in the news. Heat illness has been in the news quite a bit lately. This is the very sad, incident that happened in Northern California, where a family and their toddler child and their dog died of heat exhaustion. They finally figured out that it was heat exhaustion. Another recent heat illness event that was in the news was the UC Davis commencement ceremony, where they had it in high heat. It got delayed. It was supposed to happen earlier and there were delays. But they had 36 heat-related medical calls, and 7 people were actually hospitalized from that. So that happened just a week or so ago. But here, we're here to talk about workers, and they are particularly vulnerable to heat illness because they especially if their work is outside, like roofing and firefighters and farm laborers. So they're particularly vulnerable because they need to do the job when they're told, and so it's very important to learn how to protect these workers. But it's not only these jobs that are vulnerable. We're going to talk about some of the jobs at schools where it might also apply. Some researchers at our occupational health branch, led by Amy Heiserling, published a paper about a study they did where they looked at workers' comp records and found that there were almost 16,000 cases of heat illness between 2000 and 2017. And those are only the ones that are reported to their supervisors or their companies, and where a workers' comp case resulted. But things like just feeling dizzy from heat, or feeling faint or fainting from heat might not have made it to workers' comp. It might not have been reported. It might not have been, the workers might not have associated with heat, if they weren't aware of it. But the resulting rate of 6 cases per 100,000 workers per year is what they found. And what they're finding too, and this is important, is that the rate has been trending upward. I said it was 6 cases per 100,000 per year, but since about 2013, it's been higher than that. There was a peak here in 2006, and that was the year, I don't know if you'll remember, people who were in California then, it was that tremendous heat wave that went on for days and days and caused the transformers to blow. And so that was a very high heat event, and it shows in their data. And of course, the highest number of cases, you'd expect it to occur during the summer months. It does peak in July, but there have been cases that go into October, November, and earlier in April. So it can happen, even when you don't think it's going to be a really hot month. And what I want you to, these are the occupations. So this is by occupation. Of course, protective services would include firefighters. You'd expect that to be high. Farming is high, but building and grounds cleaning and maintenance is right in there. And also installation, maintenance, and repair. So jobs that include this, either outside or in other, places where these jobs occur, that they are vulnerable to heat illness as well. To the relevant Cal OSHA regulations, there's a heat illness standard, heat illness prevention in outdoor places of employment standard. And that does apply to all outdoor places of employment, but I'm going to kind of qualify that a little bit later. But also the injury and illness prevention program would apply because it applies to all workplaces and would include indoor work that could lead to heat illness. So it should be considered as part of your IIPP. And you can fold your, the heat illness prevention program into, included in your IIPP. And this is what I meant, outdoors isn't always outside. Like sometimes there are outbuildings that are not air conditioned. And I know my children's school used one of these cargo containers to store their emergency equipment because they didn't want to put their earthquake, the water and food that they store in there for earthquakes. They didn't want to put it, in the buildings. They have it in a container, but anyone that might go in there to sort through everything in the heat, could be vulnerable. So that's just something to consider. Cal OSHA also considers that vehicles are part of the standard if there's no air conditioning, because they've cited employers if there's no air conditioning in a vehicle and someone becomes ill. These are the risk factors for heat illness, and these are actually in the standard itself, but air temperature, of course, but relative humidity has a huge role. The more humid it is, the harder it is for you to shed heat off your body because you can't, your sweat doesn't evaporate. But also radiant heat from the sun, like direct heat from the sun and other sources. So if the sun is heating up the blacktop and it re-radiates the heat, that's all another source. Conductive, your feet might get really warm if the ground is really hot. Lack of air movement. If there's no cooling breezes, that also makes it hotter. But also the workload severity and duration. So you have to consider also what is the work they're doing? Is it lifting a lot of things? Is it, are they doing, high energy exertions out there? But also protective clothing, if they have to wear protective clothing because of what they're doing, gloves, face masks. So respirators, if they have to wear a respirator for a job, if they're using some solvents or something where they have to wear a half mask respirator, that's going to make them hotter. So these are all things to consider when you're addressing heat illness. Provisions of the standard are a written heat illness prevention plan, training, of course, for both supervisors and employees, access to shade. And this is, in the standard for outdoor employees. Anyone who works outdoors is subject to the standard, according to Cal OSHA. Water, but not just water, but encouragement to drink it. There's a study where they found that workers that had heat illness, there was still water available to them, but they didn't drink it because they didn't want to take a break to go and drink it. Rest is very important. And I feel like this is important to say. You cannot, hydrate your way out of heat illness all the time. Sometimes, it just needs people need to rest, and they need access to shade. They need to rest in a cool place. If it's, if they're in danger of being overheated. Also, the plan would include emergency response procedures, what to do if you do have a heat illness case. And then this is important, acclimatization and supervisor observation. The body needs time to adapt when working in hotter conditions. The study that Amy Heiserling did with her group found that almost 9% of heat illness occurred within 2 weeks of hire. So people who are hired and they're just not used to working in heat need time to get used to it. And about 3% of heat illness occurred on the worker's first day on the job. So this is a very important point. New workers need to be watched carefully and observed. Other prevention considerations, in addition to providing water, shade, and rest, is, that you could do, especially jobs in schools. They can schedule outdoor work or heavy work for a cooler time of day or cooler weather. This is a photo I took. I was actually just at the school to observe cleaning techniques and but it was August in Los Angeles. It was kind of humid where we were in South Central. And this worker was very, just you could see how hot he was. He was so sweaty. His sweat had soaked through his shirt. This was in one of those, kind of permanently temporary buildings in a school. And the air, I don't recall the air conditioning being on. I just know it was really hot. And he's wearing jeans. For some reason, he was wearing a beanie, so it's important to keep the air conditioning on for indoor work. And that also, with COVID, if children have been in the room recently, and I know there's, schools aren't necessarily empty during the summer. I know there's a lot of summer school. Some schools are year round. So it's important to consider this, air conditioning, loose, lightweight, light clothing. And if it's very hot and they're outdoors or going to be in some remote area on the school campus, it is important to have a buddy system or, someone checking in and making sure they're okay. Because a lot of people will have heat illness and collapse before they could get to help. So it's important to provide all these mitigations in case of high heat. And as I said, it's just going to get hotter. There are ways to monitor the weather that the National Weather Service is actually in the Kelisha Q&A. They recommend going to National Weather Service. NOAA has a heat risk map. This is today's, for today and tomorrow, it's very hot in the Bay Area and Northern California. You can see that we talk about heat stress and heat illness in the forecast. And you can also call these numbers and they'll tell you as well. This is also a heat risk map that's provided by National Weather Service. And this is for today. And you can see, the Bay Area, parts of the Bay Area and the Delta and the whole Central Valley are going to be pretty hot. And these are the resources that where some of those tools are, some of those information about the standard and resources for the standard. So I know that was quick, but I hope it at least raised your awareness of the standard and the provisions and the hazard involved.
Thank you so much, Justine. Next, I'm going to be talking about preventing or protecting workers from health effects of wildfire smoke. So in 2020, California had 5 of the largest wildfires in state history in just that year alone. And as Justine just said, it's going to keep on getting hotter. So these wildfires are going to continue to pose major health risks to the population of California and have a lot of destructive impacts on society. But in the face of this, both the public and the private sectors are trying to figure out ways to ensure just continuity of operations during these events. So that includes schools. And as occupational health and safety professionals, we all need to prepare ourselves, our communities, or any organizations that we work for, just to make sure that worker health is protected to the greatest extent possible as we continue these operations during wildfire smoke events. So wildfire smoke itself is made up mostly of particulate matter, and that's where the central health threat comes from. Particulate matter itself is a mixture of tiny particles and droplets found in the air, and these are all released as byproducts of that wildfire smoke. And as seen in this image, wildfire isn't defined by its chemical structure, but actually by its size. So PM10 is any particulate that has a diameter of less than 10 microns compared to PM2.5 is any particulate matter that's less than 2.5 microns. And this particle size matters a lot because with the particle sizes being so small with wildfire smoke, they're inhaled, and because of their size, they deposit very deeply into the lungs. And that's what leads to just an incredible variety of adverse health effects associated with exposure to wildfire smoke. So recognizing these hazards associated with the exposure to smoke, in 2019, Cal OSHA enacted an emergency standard on occupational exposure to wildfire smoke. And that's now a permanent standard. And the purpose of this talk isn't to go in depth on this standard, but it is really important for all employers and occupational health and safety professionals to familiarize themselves with this standard. So really brief summary of this standard. So what it says is that when the AQI for PM 2.5 is greater than 150, then any employer must take the following steps. So they must communicate the hazards associated with wildfire smoke to all their employees. They have to provide training, and details of that can be found in Appendix B of this wildfire smoke standard. You have to control the hazards appropriately. And then finally, if those hazards can't be controlled completely, you have to provide respirators, first under voluntary use when the AQI is above 150. And then if the AQI ever gets above 500, then respiratory protection is required under a full respiratory protection program. And now, because Cal OSHA regulations do say that you have to rely on the AQI in your area for when the standard kicks into gear, I'm gonna go over the basics of AQI, and then also how do you use these measurements to determine if control measures need to be taken to avoid unhealthy levels of exposure to wildfire smoke for workers. So AQI stands for Air Quality Index. And what it is, it's a color-coded index that's used to report air quality in a way that's supposed to be accessible to the general public. So unlike more traditional measurements that a lot of you on this call may be used to that focus on things like concentrations of a specific hazard, the AQI is actually a unitless measurement. And the purpose of it is to standardize the risks of different pollutants in the air. So this is 5 major pollutants. And just across these major pollutants, the AQI values that are below 100 are seen as satisfactory. And then as it starts to go above 100, it's seen as unhealthy, first for sensitive groups, and then above 150 for all groups of people. And for the purpose of this presentation, the AQI that I'm going to be referring to is always going to be for PM 2.5, since that's the AQI that's most relevant for the health effects that's associated with wildfire smoke. So I'm sure a lot of you have checked the AQI at this point in time after all the really bad wildfire seasons that we've been having recently. And you know there's a lot of different resources out there. However, the way that we're recommending to check AQI in your area is through a website called AirNow. We consider this to be the most reliable source of information for wildfire smoke areas, for wildfire smoke levels in your area. It's run by the US EPA, and it relies on a distributed network of sensors that they've placed across the entire country. They take data from these sensors, and then those hourly readings are used to calculate the current AQI, and that's referred to as the Nowcast AQI on this AirNow website. Another pretty cool thing about this website specifically is they'll actually give you forecasted AQI for the next day. And that can be really helpful for planning work schedules in advance. EPA also came out a couple years ago with an addition to the AirNow website called fire.airnow.gov. This is what I personally use. I really love this website a lot. And this site shows a map of all the AQIs that are calculated from sensors across the entire countries. So this includes permanent air monitors, such as what's on that normal AirNow website, but they've added a lot more data by utilizing information from lower cost sensors, which at this point in time are Purple Air monitors. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Purple Air monitors in the following slides as well. And in general, the readings from Purple Air monitors aren't actually comparable to these permanent air monitors. However, what the EPA has done is they've applied a very specific correction factor to the Purple Air data that they're getting, and that makes it a lot closer to the Nowcast AQI that they are getting from those permanent monitors. So because of this, what we're recommending is to use this website rather than the Purple Air website if you want to get a lot of information, visual data such as this map, since the correct conversions have been applied specifically for PM 2.5 for wildfire smoke. And in addition to using these online resources to check PM 2.5, there's a lot of other exposure monitoring options that you can use to measure wildfire smoke in your facility. The first is to buy your own area monitor. And this can be installed outdoors to get really highly localized AQA data of your specific website, or it could be used indoors as well, just to get a sense of the smoke infiltration into your building. And if you are installing your own monitor, just like any sort of of sensor, it's really important to read the manufacturer's guide, and also EPA has a great guide as well. And that way we're just making sure that you're installing it correctly in a way that it is actually representative of the overall air quality in your area. Another thing to note is that if you do choose a Purple Air Monitor, that data, if you want it to, will also be included onto that fire.airnow.gov map. And so that's going to be very beneficial for your organization, because then you're going to get that highly localized data of the AQI, and they're going to do that conversion for you. It's also going to benefit the larger community, especially if you're in one of those areas that doesn't have very many sensors around you. You're going to be helping out your neighbors as well. Another really useful tool during wildfire smoke events is direct reading instruments. And you can use these just like those area monitors to obtain just very localized data, either for indoor or outdoor environments. And if you use it for an indoor environment, it can be used as part of a larger risk assessment. So that way, because these things are portable, you can walk from room to room, classroom to classroom, cafeteria, office space, et cetera. And you can assess which parts of the facility are going to need more engineering controls to filter out wildfire smoke. After you've implemented those controls, you can then again do a walkthrough with one of these instruments, and you can measure the success of those control measures that you've put into place. Another important thing to note here is if you do a close read of that Cal OSHA standard, it does technically allow the use of direct reading instruments to calculate AQI. But after looking into this, the reality of doing this is actually surprisingly complicated, and to be honest, often pretty inaccurate. So in general, at this time, we're not recommending using the direct reading instruments like a photometer or an optical particle counter to calculate AQI, but instead we recommend utilizing all those online tools that I just went over, or purchasing your own area monitor. So once you have a sense of the level of smoke that's getting infiltrated into the building or your workers are being exposed to, the next step is going to be to reduce the exposures using an appropriate control measure. And the first control measure that we're going to discuss is engineering controls. The primary one is going to be filtration. So the first thing that should be done during any wildfire smoke event is to reduce the amount of outdoor air that's being let into the facility. And that way, when it makes it so that the HVAC system is recirculating the air over and over again through any filtration that's been put in place without introducing more wildfire smoke into the building. Because we're relying on those filters, it's really important to upgrade the filters to as high of a MERV rating as your system can handle, with the goal being getting that MERV rating up to MERV 13 filters or higher. But regardless of what filtration level you have, another really easy thing that you can do is just to switch the settings on that HVAC system from auto to just the on mode. And with the auto mode, that means that the system is going to be turning on and off based off of a set point, such as temperature or carbon dioxide. But if you just switch that to on, it means that it's going to be continuously circulating the air through those filters. And that's really the best scenario. And in addition to upgrading the filters in the HVAC system, portable HEPA filters, HEPA air cleaners are another really great way to filter indoor air, especially for smaller size spaces such as classrooms. And a benefit of increasing the filtration, whether it's through these HEPA filters or through MERV filters that you're upgrading in your HVAC system, is that you're actually going to be reducing two hazards at the same time. It's going to be helping reduce exposure to wildfire smoke indoors, but it's also going to be helping to reduce the amount of SARS-CoV-2 in the air, the virus that causes COVID-19. However, we all know that there's going to be times when it's not going to be possible to use engineering controls, especially for workers who just have to work outside. So in this case, the best control is just going to be to reschedule those outdoor tasks, have them do any of those outside activities on a less smoky day, and just to relocate them to other tasks that can be done inside. if that's not possible, other administrative controls that you can take is just to reduce the amount of tasks that take a lot of physical exertion, just like what Justine was talking about, of wanting to minimize the amount of really physically exhausting work that happens during hot days, during wildfire smoke events. That increased respiratory rate from any sort of physical exertion is going to increase any of those workers' exposure. And so just keep an eye on that just to reduce that type of work during wildfire smoke events. And then also very similar to reducing heat stress is just increase that frequency of breaks, in this case being in filtered indoor spaces. And for workers who do have to be outside during work or wildfire events, Cal OSHA does have some stipulations around respiratory protection. The first is that respirators must be provided under voluntary use when that AQI is above 150. And then it's required when AQI is above 500. A really important note on this is that we've all gotten really used to a lot of different types of masks during COVID, but it's really important to stress that things like homemade face coverings, medical masks, and even KN95s can't be substituted for true NIOSH-approved respirators. So you really do have to be providing things like N95s or even elastomeric respirators during these wildfire smoke events. And then lastly, it's really important just to develop a very proactive mindset when you're planning to deal with wildfire smoke exposures. One way that you can do this is to develop a wildfire smoke readiness program. And this can be integrated directly into your injury and illness prevention program. So this plan would do things like delegate responsibility to specific individuals. They're going to be the ones who are checking the AQI and then ensuring that there's really clear communication channels on how and when control measures should be implemented during these wildfire smoke events. So this is a really fast and brief overview, but we've also included a lot of great resources here to do a little bit of a deeper dive. So thank you so much, and I'll pass it back over to Justine.
Hello again. Back to my slides. All right, we're going to talk about chemicals now. I know schools use chemicals all year long, but summertime, couple things. It's a chance to kind of look at your program overall, perhaps, but also there are certain tasks that might happen more in the summer that you can keep an eye on. So mostly the regulation that, of course, we all know applies to chemical use in workplaces is the Hazard Communication Standard. And the main provisions are a chemical inventory, written plan, safety data sheets, having those on hand and available to workers, making sure the labels are in place and that workers understand them, and training. It's good, as I said, summer might be a good time to kind of look at all these provisions of the standard, especially, chemical inventory. Are you still using the same chemicals? Are the new ones that maybe got brought in included? Do you have safety data sheets for all of them? Are there new chemicals that maybe you need training for? Have there been incidents maybe that you might want to retrain people so that they understand better? And also, this is a shameless plug for implementing our Asthma Safer Cleaning program that we developed for schools. We had noticed that in the work-related asthma prevention program, that 1 in 9 of our cases are associated with cleaning products. And this is across all industries. Because cleaning products are used in every building, everywhere, right? So that's a very ubiquitous type of product, but we get a lot of cases, and around 1,100 cases so far, and 115 of these are in education. So 10% of our cases are the cleaning product cases are in education, and 302 are new onset. And what that means is that these are cases of asthma that developed in people who never had asthma before. So these are adults who get asthma as adults from something at work. That's what we track. As well as, we also track work aggravated cases, people who already have asthma and their asthma is worsened by their workplace. But these are 302 cases of new onset with 37 in education. So about 12% of our new onset cases have been in education. And we only get really the tip of the iceberg of as far as cases. So this just gives us kind of a snapshot picture of what is, could be happening out there. And this is key. 80% of our cases are in bystanders, meaning they're not the people doing the cleaning. They're people who enter the room right after the cleaning or nearby while the cleaning is taking place. In addition, we also have 330 disinfectant cases, and those have been pretty problematic. We've developed materials specifically for helping workplaces find safer disinfectants, and also to, when they have to use disinfectants, to use them safely. But this guide was developed as Healthy Cleaning and Asthma Safer Schools guide. A how-to guide was developed with, a kind of a partnership with schools. We had them pilot a lot of the methods, and we got feedback and changed it. So it's still out there. It's a way to find safer products, and it's led by the effort. We encourage the effort to be led by the custodians and by the facilities department. Like, they choose the products, they try them out. So this is a whole guide on how to do that. It's a good opportunity to kind of, help decrease the amount of asthma that is occurring in schools. And as I said, these are just worker cases that we don't track the asthma in children. So that there's going to be more than what we found. We've also, through Occupational Pesticide Illness Prevention Program, we get roughly 200 disinfectant reports a year, because disinfectants are pesticides. They're regulated as pesticides. And those, here we're just tracking asthma for the work-related asthma prevention program. But here we get other types of injuries from chemicals, and a lot of eye injuries, skin, rash and skin burns, inhalation, accidental ingestion, even people putting products in the wrong containers. So it's also important to look at our chemical use with regard to disinfectants. But going back to, the concept that I know there are this type of work that is done when kids are on break, so either over spring break or winter break, but especially over summer, the floors are refinished and made shiny. It's important to, get the school looking good for when school starts up back in August or September. So one of the things we found, one of the higher, more hazardous with respect to work-related asthma is floor finishing. We found a lot of cases that were related to floor stripper and or floor wax. Probably more so floor stripper, because these things can happen together. 5 cases were in elementary or secondary schools, 3 in colleges. But what's interesting is new onset asthma. There were 26 cases, 4 in education. So 15% of the floor care new onset asthma cases were in education. And as I said, this number might not seem high, but we only get the tip of the iceberg. Not everything is reported to us. Floor strippers, the reason why we're a bit concerned about them is that one of the ingredients is an asthmagen, which is an asthmagen is a type of chemical that has been found to cause asthma in people who've never had it before. There are a lot of things that can trigger asthma, but specifically this product, a lot of products. So look on your labels. The list of asthmagens is put out by an organization, and I realize what I haven't done is include that list, but I will do that later if you're interested. It's also important to just look at what is, on the safety data sheet. This chemical has a danger warning, which is one of the higher warnings. And so it can cause severe skin burns and eye damage. So it's something to at least be aware of if you're using these products. Then maybe there needs to be a bit more training for things like this. This isn't your normal product that is used in a school all year necessarily. And there are ways to prevent exposure to this. These were pictures from LA Unified. They were, instead of using floor stripper, they were using a chemical-free finish removal using an orbital scrubber. And it's a specific pad that has the right amount of abrasion. And they were trying that out instead. And you can build up the wax, but you don't use a chemical to strip it. You scrub it down, and it provides a finish as well. So that the floors are still shiny. And so that's, not using the chemical at all. So that's an important way to prevent exposure. There are also safer alternatives for floor finish, and you can find, them through third-party certification like Green Seal and Ecologo, EPA Safer Choice. If you do use these chemicals, of course, use lots of ventilation, open the doors, keep the air fans running, make sure that you're protecting workers by providing goggles and gloves, possibly respirators. You have to just, look and see what's recommended on the label. I think the permissible exposure limit for ethanolamine is pretty high. I mean, pretty low. So it's something to keep an eye on. They might need like half-face respirators. Another place that, a lot of schools do have swimming pools. This is not actually a high school pool, but it's a community pool. And they're fun. The pools are a great community resource. I know in the summer, a lot of schools, high schools, their pools are used to give swimming lessons to the community. And there's a lot of young, new workers that are giving swimming lessons and sometimes even helping maintain the pool. But the chemicals that are used in pools are very hazardous for the most part. These are huge tanks of bleach, sodium hypochlorite, and muriatic acid, and which is also known as hydrochloric acid. And so it's something to keep in mind. And pool chemical control is a whole science and art unto itself. That it's a difficult thing. You can see by these instructions, it's like, each part of it needs to be paid attention to. If you do something wrong, I think in this case, we were investigating a small pool that was used for a swim school. And what happened was the pumps were stopped, the water pumps were stopped, but the chlorine pump was not stopped, and it kept loading chlorine into the pipes. And when they turned everything back on, it pushed a lot of chlorine out into the pool, and everyone in that swim school was exposed to whatever gases were created in the air. And it was, very hazardous situation. They ended up in the paper, and you do not want to be in the news. You don't want your facility to end up in the news. So this is something to pay particular attention to, make sure everyone's very well trained to do this. And the reason I say that, is because it has happened. I think this was at a high school. I'm sorry for this being blurry, but this was an incident that happened in a high school where a lifeguard who did not have the proper training to handle chemicals added sodium hypochlorite to an automatic feeder containing muriatic acid. And so that resulted in the formation of chlorine gas in this case. And she ended up in the hospital. She was hospitalized and she couldn't return to work for 2 more days. There were a lot of different incidents that we looked into or investigated. And so that resulted in, we actually have a pool chemical safety guide, and there are like worker posters as part of the guide. You can access it on our website as well. So this was something that resulted from a lot of, just looking into all the incidents that were happening and how to prevent them. Look at your chemical and PPE storage. This is it was a swimming pool that I was on a ride along with the county inspector, and they knew he was coming, and this is how their storage room looked. And this was just another place where they had all their gloves, and this is a respirator in here, and I don't know what, pants, looks like some trunks or shorts or something, were just kind of thrown into a bin together. So, just make sure that everything looks good. Get those eye wash stations, working properly. This was also one, there was no actual bottles in the eye wash station. It was blocked by other things. That's not good. This one looked great. That had a tag that showed that it was being inspected on a monthly basis, that there's a cap on the eye wash. So these are all things that workers might need to use. So make sure they're maintained properly. And, it's a chance to update the safety data sheets. Make sure they're up to date and accessible. The new SCSs have pictograms in them, so make sure they're the most recent version of everything you use. Formulations change in a lot of chemicals, so just make sure that that's, and this is not just for pool chemicals, every chemical, make sure you have the most recent version. And that's basically it. And this is how you access our materials that I talked about, the Cleaning for Asthma Safe Schools, cleaning product and disinfectant resources, and the pool chemical safety page. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Justine and Elon, for those excellent presentations. Very informative. Just a reminder to all of our participants, if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A box. We have 2 questions so far. The first question is, have grocery store workers reached out about heat illness related to pushing shopping carts from the parking lot to the front entrance? Since grocery stores typically are seen as a quote cooler jobs because the inside is usually air conditioned. I can imagine this might not be a priority, but sometimes workers can spend half a day outdoors. Unfortunately, there is usually a strong negative response by many customers when these shopping carts aren't moved to the front of the store. I'm wondering what we can do.
Yeah, that's a good question. And they would be, subject to the heat illness prevention standard, because if they're an outdoor worker, that applies. Maybe having more workers on that, so each worker isn't spending as much time outside, and they can take breaks, and and all the things apply. Having shade, or at least go indoors for a certain amount of time where they can cool off, make sure they have water, and that they rest. So you need to build in more breaks. Yeah, I don't know. Because if that's the job, is going out retrieving carts, and I bet when it's hotter too, the customers don't want to bring their carts, closer to the store. They just want to leave them near the car because they just want to get in their air-conditioned car and go. So that might be a bigger problem. But other than, just building in more breaks for people, I don't know what else other than the standard things. I know if it wasn't a super hot place like, Palm Springs or something, then maybe misters, or that's what some businesses have used, is misters outdoors to keep their workers cooler. That might be a possibility, but that would be a kind of a hot job, because the parking lot would be very hot. All the reflective surfaces, the cars, the black asphalt itself is just very radiant as far as radiating heat back. So that is something to keep an eye on.
Thank you. And the next question is, asthma related cases were documented as OSHA recordables? So I guess were asthma related cases documented as OSHA recordables?
I mean, they should be. That's not how we get our cases, but they should be if it was a work-related illness. Sometimes the worker doesn't necessarily associate it with work, like they might not realize it, or the supervisors might not realize it, but it is important. We get our cases through what are mostly through what are called doctor's first reports. Like if a doctor has some exposure, any workplace exposure, whether it's heat or chemicals or anything, and they think it's due to work, they're supposed to, in California, they're supposed to fill out a doctor's first report. So that's where we get some of our cases, because doctors don't always do that, but we do get a lot from that. The workers' comp information system, we get some cases from that. Emergency room reports and hospital discharge data. So we kind of have different sources, and I'm not the person who does it. That's Jennifer Flattery in our group. She's the guru of data. But they, so they should be recorded as OSHA recordables, but we don't get them through that.
Thank you. And this question is just for me, but following up on what you were just saying about how so often both the employees and the employer might not realize that what is being experienced is work related. So do you have any advice on how people can sort of figure that out, of kind of make the connection, or like what questions can be asked to kind of make that connection, that this, like what you're experiencing could be work related, and like what steps can we take to figure that out?
I mean, to me, it's all education, it's all training, because especially, going back to heat illness, a lot of workers, like they've been outside working all day and they're not feeling great, but they're not really, they're going to go home. But sometimes the heat illness, the symptoms happen later, like when they're at home and they're not at work to report it, but letting them know that sometimes can happen. So that's part of the training, that sometimes can happen. Same with asthma, someone might not associate that. It's like, oh, this is my asthma that I've had for years. So, but they might not know that it's being triggered by the chemicals they're using, or by chemicals someone else is using, so they might not even know. We get a lot of fragrance cases, it's like they might not even make that connection, or go home and have an asthma attack later, but it is related to work. So for me, it's just, I think a lot of workers aren't trained on work-related asthma. It's not, often not part of the safety data sheet or included, but it is important to do that training. I don't know, did you have any other ideas, Elon?
No, I think you covered it very well.
Yeah. So in kind of other LOHP courses, sometimes we also talk about how this can be an area where the safety committee can get involved, of kind of like keeping your ear to the ground and asking questions, or figuring out, like, could be through a body mapping activity, or just really having conversations with other folks of like, hey, like, I've been getting headaches, and then you might find out other people have also been getting headaches, or, just to sort of kind of when, like, the education piece, and then also communication about what people are experiencing, because I think there's sort of a gap between figuring out what's going on at the individual level and connecting it to what might be happening sort of at the collective level of different employees.
Yeah, it's great if workplaces have a safety committee, and we even have one at our workplace, and we have an anonymous suggestion box and a hotline that people can call if they want, have anything to report. If people don't feel safe reporting it to their own supervisor, they might, to the safety committee or through peers, and maybe that safety committee can look into it. So that's also an important, feedback to the employer that something is happening.
Thank you. We have another question. When a heat issue has been reported to the employer and nothing has changed, can you report this to OSHA with anonymity?
I don't know about that. I mean, I think if it's an employee, one of the workers, I think they can. It's something, because OSHA doesn't come in and go right to that person and go, where was the hazard you were talking about? They come in and they don't tell the employer who made the report, because they realize that could be, that could be really have bad consequences for the worker as far as their employment status. So I believe it is anonymous as far as that goes. Like they're not going to tell them who did that.
Yeah.
I mean, same with us when we go into workplaces, for some of our investigations, we don't tell them why, what case triggered that investigation.
Thank you. Yes, my understanding is that you can, excuse me, report to OSHA anonymously, but that it lowers there's sort of like a ranking system of how they respond. And so if a complaint is anonymous, then it goes kind of lower down on the ranking system. And if there's a name attached to the complaint, then it kind of is taken, it's kind of going to be addressed more quickly. But if an individual worker, like Justine was just saying, for issues of they're worried about retaliation, or for any other reason, they can also work with, if there's like a union or there's a worker center, the name that's associated with the complaint doesn't necessarily need to be that worker's name, but it is kept anonymous. Any other questions? We have a couple minutes left, so if anyone has another question, we have time. And until then, I will put our SASH website in the chat for all of our previous webinars, if anyone wants to look back on the webinars we've done in the past. Okay, so in the chat, we have another question. Did you discuss fires and best protection? Yes, we did. We talked about wildfire smoke and different protections, different protections that employers can take and that schools can, different ways that schools can go about figuring out how to protect their employees.
Looks like there's another question about air quality. How safe is the air quality in a work shed and a maintenance shed with sawdust and chemicals?
Thank you.
It sounds like if it's a shed, I mean, everything still applies as far as, wanting ventilation and protection. And it sounds like it could be hot as well. Sawdust. We have also a booklet on work-related asthma from wood dust, because that's another that's another asthmagen, especially certain types of wood. So it would depend on a lot of things, like, as I said, ventilation. Do you have tools that can capture the dust, capture the wood dust as it comes off the tool? That's what we recommend as far as engineering controls, and then, good general ventilation as well, for chemicals as well, any chemical use. And if it could be done outdoors, then that would also be a good option. And then if there's still a high level of either wood dust or chemicals, then you would go to PPE, like a respirator. So, there's the hierarchy of controls to consider. We just sort of look at it that way as the best framework.
Great. Well, thank you both again so much. This was an excellent webinar. I really appreciate all your time and information. And let's see, I can turn it back over to Michelle. I don't know if there's any final announcements or anything.
Hello, yes, thank you so much for joining us today. You'll receive an email at noon Pacific tomorrow with a link to the evaluation, and once you fill out that evaluation, it'll qualify you for a certificate of completion. And it uses the Zoom, if it marked you as attended, that's how it decides who it's going to send that follow-up email to. Everyone, whether people attended or not, will also get a link to the recording. So thank you all so much for being here today.